It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the sports business owner of the Mickey Mike Up Sports Talk podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to start a sports talk podcast?
Yeah, for sure. So I've always wanted to work in media and everything like that. And going into my freshman year of college, I figured I needed to try to start doing something to kind of get my name out there. And my friends were like, "You talk a lot." And I was like, "I do. That's correct." And so I was like, "Why not start a podcast?" And so I talked to my friends about it, and we realized that there's not a ton of just NWSL coverage, and I wanted to kind of be someone who could do that. And so my friends and my family kind of encouraged me, and I just started doing it.
How did you come up with the name of your podcast, Mickey Mike Up?
So it's actually kind of funny because I'm terrible at naming things, like so bad at it. And so I had tweeted, I was like, "Hey guys, I'm starting a podcast. Like, does anybody have name suggestions?" And my friend Alexa was like, "What about this?" And I was like, "Okay, that sounds good." And no offense to my other friends, but the rest of the ideas weren't that great. And so I was like, "Alexa, you win." And I went with Mickey Mike's Up because I thought it sounded cool. And some of my friends call me Mick. Some of my friends call me Mickey. The mix was like microphone. It kind of like, I don't know, it was like kind of like a play on words a little bit there.
What are some sports that you cover?
So on my podcast, I pretty much just talk about the NWSL. That's kind of the whole focus of it. Everyone, like during the summer, I did talk about the Olympics, what was going on there. Now that the NWSL season is over, I'm probably going to talk a little bit about hockey just because I am volunteering at some Riveters games. But beyond that, it'll pretty much just stay the NWSL because I kind of want to be a voice for them.
What's it like, obviously, covering the NWSL and obviously, as you talked about, the Riveters, what is it like covering some of the PHF?
So I love being able to talk about the NWSL. I think that it's where I want to work one day. And so like getting to talk about game recaps or just what's going on and certain players and like their journeys and all that kind of stuff. I think that it's so much fun. And I hope that one day I have enough like credibility to get some NWSL players on my podcast because I think that would be super cool. For the PHF, I haven't really started like talking about it on my podcast yet because I am still figuring out the rules of hockey. I was at the Riveters game last weekend and one of the guys there was like teaching me the rules of hockey. So now that I know a little bit more about it, I will be able to talk about it more, but I haven't gotten into that yet.
Who are some people that you've had the privilege of interviewing?
So I got to interview one of my friends, Bianca. She works for the Houston Dash and she does their content and media, and she's one of my really, really good friends and supports me in everything. And so I got to talk to her about what her job is like, and it was so cool to get insight into like where I want to start one day. And then I've also been able to interview Arielle Chambers, who she works for Bleacher Report, has started Highlight Her, covers the WNBA. That one was so cool because she like is one of my inspirations for just being a force in women's sports. And then upcoming, this one hasn't, I mean, by the time that this is out, I'll have done this, but I am interviewing Marissa Pilla, who is a reporter for CBS Sports and covers the NWSL and MLS. And so I'm really, really looking forward to that.
Of course, when it comes to other interviews, are you planning on interviewing professional athletes in the Riveters and stuff like that?
Yeah. So right now I have a list of some people that I'm trying to get on in like the next couple weeks. And now that I've been at a Riveters game volunteering, I do have some connections there that I know people who would be able to get someone on for me or like put in a good word for me, help me out. So I do think that is in the plans for the next few weeks after the holidays wrap up and everything.
What are some of your future plans with the Mickey Mics Up?
So I think that I want this to be a long-term thing, definitely. I love doing it. I had said a few weeks ago that I was going to take a break, like going into the holidays and everything, but I just genuinely enjoy like watching games and writing up the recaps and like sharing it. And all my friends are so supportive. So I think that it's something that I definitely want to keep doing. Maybe get like more players on one day. And I think that obviously it's really important to like talk about the NWSL and like the games and that kind of stuff. But I do think that I want to start focusing on like bigger issues, which I don't know if that's going to be something that I'm doing on Mickey Mike's Up or another podcast that I'm going to be on with a organization that I'm working with in the next Gotham season.
Of course, as you talked about the recaps, what is it like obviously writing up the recaps, and how do you know obviously what to talk about when it comes to the recaps?
Yeah, for sure. With the recaps, I kind of start by looking at the stats of the game and I'll just like write down some quick bullets like, okay, goal scored this here, this person subbed for this person kind of thing. Because obviously like soccer, you only have a few subs. And so it's a lot easier to keep track of that. And so then if I haven't watched the game, I go back and watch it. And from there, I'll kind of like mark down like strong points that I saw, and then I kind of just put that into paragraph form and talk about like, okay, so this game was a really good matchup because these two teams were close on the leaderboard kind of thing. And this person had high potential to score and they did. And I just kind of talk about the highlights in my personal opinion. It's not the most professional game recap. Like I'm not going to be posting it on a blog anytime soon, but it gives me a basis to have a conversation about it.
Of course, with the NWSL being your previous main topic, and obviously the PHF being one of your other topics, are you also talking about, like, let's say the WNBA and college sports for women?
Yeah. The WNBA, I had planned to talk about them a little bit, but then once I had those plans set up and then I moved into college and then I shifted to every 2 week schedule instead of every week schedule. And then it got a lot harder to even keep up with the NWSL. And so I was kind of letting myself adjust first semester of college. And then I figured going into second semester next season, I can cover both evenly. There was a few times where I talked about the WNBA. I think I talked about like the All-Star game, but I definitely want to start being more consistent in talking about that. As for college sports, I haven't gotten into that. I think that in my next episode, I am going to talk a little bit about the NCAA tournament because that should be over by then. And I am going to the Rutgers game on Friday in the Elite Eight. So I'm really looking forward to that. And so I'll be able to talk a little bit about seeing that. But it hasn't been something that I have been able to get completely into because, again, being a first semester college student, there's a lot going on. And I do have 2 jobs on my campus working with the sports department. So I haven't found the right balance yet.
What is that like, obviously being able to balance, obviously being a college student, working for the college, and also starting up this podcast?
So sorry. Starting my podcast, I started that in July. So before college started, and like in the summer, I have a summer job. I worked at a country club, but I still had a lot more time on my hands to do things. And now that I've been at school, there's just so many assignments. And it's like I'm working for the women's soccer team on my campus. So I had to be at all those home games. And then I'm doing sports writing. So I have to dedicate at least a few hours to write an article once a week. And so finding time to like do all of that and then all my schoolwork. And then I also got a concussion. So I fell behind. And it was just a lot going on. And so I'm still working on figuring out how to find the right balance, if I'm being honest. But I think that my key has been to use a planner. I have a planner that I lay out very detailed schedules of things that I need to get done, because if not, I'm not going to get anything done. And like over the summer, I usually recorded my podcast in advance. Like I'd record it like Wednesday and then edit it Thursday and have it like preset to post on Saturday. And now I'm usually like recording like the intro and conclusion Friday night. And then waking up Saturday and recording the rest and posting it like right away instead of scheduling it, just because that's the only time I have. But I love it, so I keep doing it.
What are some of your favorite memories and moments with covering your podcast?
I think that it was a lot of fun to have my roommate on, because that episode was like just about college and the transition to college. And I think that it was super fun to like talk to her about everything. And I think it was a good like bonding moment for us, because we had known each other for a few weeks at that point. And I think it helped us be able to like kind of express the things that we were like having a good time with and not having a good time with, but like in a fun way. And so we kind of worked out the kinks of like being roommates with a stranger early because of that. Obviously, I loved talking to Ari. That was probably one of like the highlights of my podcast. I think that she is an incredible person, and she was just so easy to talk to. I remember being so nervous beforehand, and she just made the conversation so easy, and like it was just great. And I think that those are definitely like standout moments for me.
Of course, what are some of your future plans in your podcast moving forward?
So moving forward, I want to try to get more consistent. This is like just a me thing, but I want to get more consistent with posting at like the same time, because right now I'm kind of like, okay, well, there's NWSL games at this time, I'll post before them. Okay, there's NWSL games earlier in the day, I'll post after them. So there's not like a set time that I post, and I think that I need to find that. And then obviously I want to try to get NWSL players on. I have some ins places, and so I'm trying to see what I can do with getting players on, and that's definitely part of my future plans, because I would love to just talk to some of the players about what it's like playing professionally, injuries, recovery, all that kind of stuff.
Of course, what advice would you give people looking to go into working in a sports podcast talking about women's sports?
I think that if you are really passionate about women's sports and you really like think that it's your place, I think you should do it. I think that women's sports need more people who are there and passionate and ready to cover it, because it's such a good market for media stuff, but also just like the players are so talented and there's so much to work with there. And I really think that if you're just going into women's sports as like a pathway to get to men's sports, like that's not, like personally I don't think that that's right, because women's sports needs people who are dedicated. And so if you want to start a podcast to talk about women's sports because you're dedicated to it, go for it. Like message me if you need help. Like I'm so willing to help people who have a voice and are passionate about it.
What advice would you give people looking to obviously have at the podcast interviewing professional athletes such as me and you have done?
I think that nerves are okay. I feel like a lot of times it's like, well, I shouldn't be nervous. Like I should be ready. But like you can be ready and be nervous. Go in prepared, but not overly prepared, because I think that a lot of times, like, especially for someone like me, like with my anxiety, like I plan out how I want the conversation to go exactly, but you don't know what the other person's answers are going to be. So the only thing you can do is have questions ready and just have guided notes on like kind of where you want the conversation to go. But I think that you would just have to like realize that like they're normal people too. Like, yeah, they're professional athletes, but at the end of the day, like we're all just normal people. And so just have a conversation as if you're having a conversation with like a high school soccer player or a parent or a cousin or something like that. And I feel like that's a lot easier said than done. I'm still working on it, but I think that that's how I look at it now.
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media?
So I have an Instagram at Mickey Mikes Up, and then I don't have a specific podcast Twitter, but I tweet my podcast on my regular Twitter, which is at Mickey_Alfano. And I definitely use Twitter a lot more than my Instagram. My Instagram is a little bit bare, but I'm working on it.
Thank you again, Mickey, for your interview, and best of luck in your future with Mickey's Mike's Up podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Mickey, for your interview, and best of luck in your future.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk, Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.